3 days before my wedding, I found out the man I was about to marry had been sleeping with my younger sister for over a year. I didn't cancel the wedding. I didn't scream. I didn't send a single angry text. Instead, I let the whole thing go ahead exactly as planned, the 400 guests, the white dress, the string quartet, all of it. Because I had realized something in those 3 days that changed everything. The wedding wasn't going to be my humiliation. It was going to be my stage. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of the most expensive, most public, most perfectly controlled goodbye of my entire life. Let me start at the beginning, because the betrayal is only half of it. The other half is the money, and the money is what made them think they were untouchable. I met Daniel 6 years ago, at a friend's birthday dinner where I hadn't even wanted to go. He was charming in the way that charming men are dangerous. He made you feel, in any room, like you were the only person worth talking to. He remembered things. Small things. The name of the town I grew up in, the way I took my coffee, an offhand comment I'd made about a book 3 weeks earlier. At the time I thought it was attentiveness. I understand now it was inventory. He was learning me the way a good salesman learns a product, finding the features that would matter later. He was a financial advisor. Smart, ambitious, the kind of man who always knew which restaurant was about to become impossible to get into, which stock was about to move, which charity gala was worth being seen at. My family adored him. My mother called him a catch, and she said it often, the way you'd repeat a fact you were proud to have memorized. My father, who trusted almost no one and had once made a boyfriend of mine sweat through an hour of questions about his 5-year plan, trusted Daniel completely. Within a year, Daniel was the one my father called for advice. That still stings, a little. My father is a careful man, and Daniel got past him too. And my younger sister, Megan, adored him most of all, which I thought, at the time, was sweet. Let me tell you about Megan, because you need to understand her to understand all of it. Megan is 3 years younger than me. She was 23 when Daniel and I started dating, and she was, in the way of certain younger siblings, a little lost and a great deal envious. Not in a way she ever said out loud. In a way I could feel. I was the one with the steady career, the apartment with the good light, the relationship that looked, from the outside, like an advertisement. Megan drifted between jobs and apartments and men who never quite worked out, and I watched her watch my life with an expression I told myself was admiration. I wanted her close. That was my mistake, though I'd make it again, because the alternative is a kind of coldness I don't want to live inside. I wanted my little sister to see that good things were possible, that a steady life wasn't a cage. So I brought Daniel into every family dinner, every holiday, every weekend at my parents' lake house. When Megan needed money, I gave it to her and told our parents not to worry. When Megan needed somewhere to stay between leases, she stayed with me, and with Daniel, when he was over, which by then was most nights. I built a warm, bright world, and I pulled my little sister all the way inside it. I see now that I handed her the keys. Here is the part about the money, because this is where the whole thing turns. 2 years ago, my grandmother passed away and left me a substantial inheritance. Not generational wealth money, but life-changing money for someone like me, a little over $600,000. My grandmother was a careful woman. She had run a small business of her own in a time when women weren't supposed to, and she had watched, over a long life, too many capable women hand their independence to men who hadn't earned it. So her will was specific in a way that I didn't fully appreciate until much later. The inheritance was mine. Separately. In my name alone. Protected, by her careful instruction, from becoming anybody else's but mine. At the reading of the will, the lawyer paused on that clause and looked at me over his glasses and said, "She was very clear about this part." I thought it was just my grandmother being old-fashioned. I know now it was my grandmother reaching forward through time to save a granddaughter she wouldn't live to warn. Daniel knew about the inheritance. Of course he did. He'd been at the funeral, holding my hand, the picture of a supportive partner. And about 8 months before the wedding, he came to me with what he called an opportunity. We were at his apartment. He'd cooked, he'd opened the good wine, he'd set the whole scene the way he set every scene. His firm, he explained, was launching a private investment fund. Exclusive. Invitation only. The kind of return that people like us don't usually get access to. And it would make so much sense, he said, so gently, so reasonably, for me to move my grandmother's money into it. We're building a life together, he said, taking my hand across the table. That money shouldn't just sit in some savings account losing value to inflation. Let me make it work for us. For our future. For our future. He was very good. I want you to understand how good he was, because if you think you'd have seen through him instantly, you're underestimating him, and underestimating him is exactly the mistake that cost everyone else. I almost did it. I need you to know how close I came. I had the transfer forms, he'd helpfully printed them for me, half filled out on my kitchen table for the better part of a week. But something stopped me. Not suspicion, not yet. Just my grandmother's voice in my head. She was very clear about this part. The careful woman who had written that careful will. I told Daniel I wanted to wait until after the wedding to make any big financial moves, that it felt right to start our marriage and our finances fresh, together, as one. He smiled and said of course, no pressure, whenever I was ready. But I saw it. Just for a second. A flicker across his face, there and gone. I told myself at the time it was disappointment, the natural letdown of a man whose thoughtful idea hadn't quite landed. I know now it was something colder. It was a man watching a door he had assumed was already open begin, very slightly, to close. And I know now what he did next, in the privacy of his phone, the moment I'd gone home. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I kept the money where it was. That single decision, that small, stubborn loyalty to a dead woman's careful voice, is the reason I'm telling you this story instead of a much sadder one. Now. The betrayal. And how I found it. 3 days before the wedding, I went to Daniel's apartment to drop off the groomsmen's gifts, engraved cufflinks, in little wooden boxes, that I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing. I had a key. We were getting married in 72 hours, of course I had a key. He wasn't home, he was at a client dinner, he'd told me that morning, kissing my forehead on his way out. I let myself in to leave the gift boxes on his table, and I saw his laptop open on the kitchen counter, the screen still glowing, a message thread open on it. I wasn't snooping. I want to be honest about that, because the honesty matters to me, given everything that followed. I walked over to close the laptop, the way you'd quietly close a cabinet someone left hanging open. My hand was on the lid. And the messages were right there, lit up, impossible not to see. They were to Megan. My sister. I'm not going to read them to you. Some things, once you've read them, you carry forever, and I won't hand them to you to carry too. But I will tell you what they established, beyond any possible doubt, standing there in that kitchen with my hand frozen on the laptop lid. That it had been going on for over a year. That it had started, and this is the detail that I still cannot fully hold in my mind, at my own engagement party. The night I stood up in front of a room full of people I loved and announced that I'd found the love of my life. While I was downstairs, glowing, accepting hugs and champagne and congratulations, Daniel and my sister were somewhere upstairs in that same house. The messages referenced it. Joked about it. Started the way it started, he'd written once, with a laughing emoji, and Megan had written back, at your own engagement party, you animal, and he'd replied, best night of the year. They laughed about me. There were months of it. Little cruelties traded back and forth, about how I was so trusting it's almost boring, about how I actually believe everyone's as nice as she is, about how Megan had to keep playing the devoted little sister at family dinners and how exhausting it was. I read my sister describe loving me as exhausting. And then I found the part that wasn't romantic at all. The part that was a business plan. Daniel had written, in plain words I will never forget the shape of, that once we were married and my inheritance was in the fund, he would have options. That a divorce in year 2 or 3, after the money's commingled, he wrote, that exact cold phrase, would leave him in a very different position than he's in now. Megan had replied with a laughing emoji and the words you're terrible. And he had replied with 2 words. I'm patient. I'm patient. I stood in that kitchen, 72 hours before my wedding, holding a wooden box of engraved cufflinks for groomsmen, and I read the man I loved describe me as a transaction with a maturity date. And here is the strange thing, the thing I have turned over in my mind so many times since. I did not cry. Something in me went very, very calm. It was the calm you feel when a problem you've been unconsciously sensing for months finally resolves into a clear picture. The flicker on his face 8 months ago. The way Megan sometimes couldn't quite meet my eyes. The relief, almost, of a mystery solved. I closed the laptop. I left the cufflinks exactly where I'd planned to leave them, squared neatly on the table, because some instinct told me that changing nothing was the beginning of my power. I locked the door behind me. I drove home. And I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where the transfer forms had sat 8 months earlier, and I started to think. I had 3 days. Now, most people in that moment do one of two things. They explode, a screaming confrontation, a thrown ring, a midnight phone call full of words you can never take back, a cancelled wedding and a story that everyone whispers about for years in which you are, unfairly, half the punchline. Or they collapse, they call it off quietly, they hide, they let the betrayal shrink them down to something small and ashamed. I understood both of those instincts. I felt both of them, in crashing waves, that first sleepless night, lying in the dark in the apartment with the good light, looking at the dress hanging on the closet door like a ghost of a future that had never actually existed. But by the time the sun came up, I kept returning to one cold, clarifying fact. 400 people were about to gather in one room. Daniel's parents, who had always treated me as not quite good enough for their son, with their little corrections and their raised eyebrows. Daniel's business partners and his most important clients, the man he wanted to impress more than anyone else alive, the audience he actually performed his whole life for. My own family. The parents who adored him. The aunts and uncles who'd watched me grow up. And the sister who had been laughing at me, in writing, for over a year. Everyone Daniel cared about. Everyone whose opinion shaped his entire world. Every single person he was building his future reputation on. They were all about to be in one room, seated, quiet, looking at a stage, waiting for someone to speak. Why on earth would I waste that? So I made a decision that my best friend Priya, the only living soul I told, was certain meant I had lost my mind. I decided the wedding would go ahead. Every part of it. And I spent the next 3 days not crying, but preparing. Let me tell you exactly what I did, because the preparation is the whole story. The first thing I did, the very next morning, was call my grandmother's estate lawyer, the careful woman's careful lawyer. I confirmed, and asked him to put in writing, that my inheritance remained exactly where it was, untouched, in my name alone, with Daniel's name attached to absolutely nothing. It had never gone into his fund. He had been patient, waiting for after the wedding to make his move. And I sat in that lawyer's quiet office and I understood, fully, that there would be no after. The relief was so total it was almost funny. The lawyer asked if everything was all right. I said, it's going to be. The second thing I did was make copies. The messages. The plan. Daniel's own words about the timeline, the commingling, the divorce he was scheduling before he'd even married me. I photographed everything, carefully, with timestamps. I didn't alter a single word, I didn't need to, and altering it would have made me something closer to what they were. The truth, in his own writing, was more than enough. I printed it. I put it somewhere safe. And I made sure Priya had a copy too, just in case, because when you're about to do something this large, you make sure the truth survives you. The third thing I did was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. For 3 days, I said nothing. I smiled. I went to the final dress fitting and let the seamstress fuss over me and tell me I looked like something out of a dream, and I looked at myself in that mirror in that dress and I did not let my face do anything but glow. I answered Daniel's good morning texts with hearts. When he called to ask whether the groomsmen had liked the cufflinks, I told him I was so glad he'd seen them, and I listened to him have no idea what those words cost me. And then there was the rehearsal dinner, the night before the wedding. I had to sit through the entire rehearsal dinner. Daniel stood up, glass in hand, in front of both our families, and gave a toast about me. He called me the most honest person he'd ever met. He said he'd never been so sure of anything. He looked at me with what I now understand was pure performance, the satisfaction of a con man admiring his own nearly finished work, and the whole table went and my mother dabbed her eyes. And then my sister Megan stood up. She raised her glass to me. There were actual tears in her eyes. She's a better actress than I ever gave her credit for, or maybe the guilt was finally reaching her, I'll never know. And she said I was the best big sister anyone could ever ask for. She said she didn't know what she'd do without me. And I looked my sister directly in the eyes, and I raised my own glass, and I said, "Thank you, Meg. That means everything." That was the hardest acting I have ever done, and the knowledge that I will never have to do anything that hard again is one of the quiet gifts that day left me. Because here is what those 3 days taught me, what they taught me without ever meaning to. The most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone has decided to underestimate. And they had underestimated me completely. They thought I was the trusting one, the soft one, the boring one, the woman who'd sign the transfer forms and smile and never once look up. They had built their entire elegant plan on the foundational assumption that I would never see it coming, and that even if I somehow did, I would break rather than move. They had bet everything on my weakness. They had never once considered my patience. The wedding day arrived. And it was, I will admit, beautiful. My grandmother would have hated the expense and loved the flowers. 400 people in a restored estate hall with 20-foot arched windows and afternoon light pouring across the stone floor, a string quartet playing something soft and aching as the guests found their seats. I stood at the back in my grandmother's pearls and a dress that cost more than my first car, and I felt, against all reason, completely serene. The storm had passed days ago. All that was left was the clean, cold clarity of a decision already made. Priya found me in the last moment before the doors opened. She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "You're sure?" she whispered. "There's still time to just leave. Walk out the back. You don't owe any of them a performance." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. And I meant it down to my shoes. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm. My father, who adored Daniel, who had no idea what was coming, who patted my hand and leaned in and whispered, "He's a good man, sweetheart. You chose well." I just smiled and let him believe, for 30 more seconds, in the man he thought he'd vetted. Daniel stood at the altar looking like every magazine's idea of a perfect groom, and he smiled at me with what I now recognize as the deep satisfaction of a man watching his plan glide into its final, profitable stage. Megan stood among the bridesmaids in blush pink, glowing, the very picture of a devoted sister, exactly where I had asked her to stand. The officiant began. We moved through the opening words, the welcome, the gathering together. And then we reached the part of the ceremony where, in our plan, the couple would each say a few words to one another before the vows. I had asked the officiant, days before, if I might go first. I told him I'd written something special for Daniel. He thought it was the most romantic thing he'd heard all season. I turned. But not to Daniel. I turned to face our 400 guests. And I lifted the microphone gently off its stand, which made the officiant blink, because that was not at all how we'd rehearsed it. But I smiled at him, reassuring, and I kept my voice warm and clear and absolutely, perfectly steady. "Before I marry this man," I said, "I want to thank everyone for being here. Some of you traveled a very long way to be in this room today. And I've decided that you all deserve to know exactly the kind of man you came here to celebrate." Daniel's smile didn't move, but his eyes did. A small flicker, the same flicker from 8 months ago, across his face at his kitchen table. He didn't understand yet. I think, for one more second, he believed this was a speech about how wonderful he was. "Daniel is patient," I said. "I want to tell all of you just how patient he is." And I watched the word land on him. I watched the blood drain from his face in real time as he recognized his own sentence, his own private, written, cold little sentence, coming back to him out loud, in front of every single person whose opinion he had ever cared about. 8 months ago, I continued, my voice never rising, never wavering, Daniel asked me to move my inheritance, money my late grandmother left to me, and me alone, into a private fund at his firm. I almost did. But I waited. And 3 days ago, I finally found out why he was so very keen for me to wait until after the wedding. The room had gone completely silent. The string quartet had stopped playing. 400 people leaned forward as one body. 3 days ago, I found messages on Daniel's laptop. Messages going back more than a year, beginning, as it happens, at our own engagement party. Messages between Daniel and someone he had been seeing throughout our entire engagement. And in those messages, he laid out a plan. He would marry me. He would move my grandmother's money into his fund. And then, in his own words, after the money's commingled, he would file for divorce in year 2 or 3, leaving him, again in his exact words, in a very different position than he's in now. When the person he was seeing told him he was terrible, he wrote back 2 words. I paused, and for the first time I turned and looked directly at him. He wrote, "I'm patient." You could have heard a breath travel across that hall. I'm not going to tell you who the other person was, I said, turning back to the guests. Because she is in this room. And she has to live with herself for the rest of her life, and I promise you, that is a far longer sentence than anything I could hand her today. But I didn't have to name her. Because in that frozen, horrified, electric silence, every head in that room began to turn, slowly, instinctively, scanning the faces for any flicker of reaction, and Megan, my sister, made the one mistake that betrayers always make at the end. She broke. Her hand flew to her mouth. She made a small, strangled sound. And she took one step backward out of the line of bridesmaids, one step, in her blush pink dress, in front of 400 people. She named herself. I never had to say a word. My mother's face. I will carry my mother's face for the rest of my life. The moment the understanding arrived, the way her eyes went from Megan to Daniel, to me, and back to Megan, and the way her hand found my father's arm and gripped it, and the way my father's expression, the careful man who had vetted everyone, simply collapsed. I turned back to Daniel one last time. He had started to say my name. Claire, Claire, please, let me, but there was nothing left to let him do. There was no next sentence in the world that helped him. I kept the money where it was, I told him, and I said it gently, almost kindly, because cruelty would have made me his equal and I had decided not to be. Every cent. It was never in your fund. It was never going to be. There is nothing to commingle. There is nothing to wait for. You were patient, Daniel, for absolutely nothing. I slid the ring off my finger. I set it down, carefully, on the open page of the officiant's book, right on the line where my signature was supposed to go. And I picked up the small bag that Priya had been holding by the door, because of course I had planned the exit too. I planned everything now, and I turned, one last time, to the 400 stunned guests. The reception is fully paid for, I said. The bar is open. The food, I'm told, is extraordinary, and it would be a genuine shame to let it go to waste. So please, stay. Eat. Dance. Celebrate. Just not the marriage. I let myself smile, fully, for the first time in 3 days. Celebrate the fact that I found out in time. And I walked back down that aisle, alone, in my grandmother's pearls, past 400 people who had arrived to watch me get married and instead had watched me get free. Some of them were crying. And a few of them, and I will never, as long as I live, forget this, a few of them began, quietly, hesitantly, and then not so hesitantly, to applaud. I walked out through the 20-foot doors into the gold of the afternoon, and Priya already had the car pulled around, engine running, because she's the kind of friend who plans the exit with you. And we drove away from the most beautiful disaster I have ever orchestrated in my life. Here is what happened after. Daniel's plan didn't merely fail. It detonated his entire life, exactly where he'd built it. His business partners had been sitting in that room. His most important clients had been sitting in that room. And men who trust other men with their money do not continue trusting a man they have just personally watched scheme to defraud his own bride at the altar. The phone calls he relied on stopped being returned. Within a month, he was quietly pushed out of his own firm. The exclusive fund he'd wanted my grandmother's $600,000 for never launched at all. The last I heard, he had moved to another city to start over, which is what men like Daniel always do. They assumed the problem was the city. Megan and I do not speak. My parents tried, for a while, to broker some kind of peace, the way parents do, because the alternative, a living daughter they have to grieve, is almost unbearable to them. But some bridges don't get rebuilt. They just stand there, broken, marking where the river is. I don't hate her. Hate would mean she still takes up room inside me, and she doesn't, not anymore. I simply wish her a quiet life, somewhere far from mine. My mother and I, though, are closer now than we have ever been in my life. She apologized, for adoring him, for not seeing it, for all the years she spent telling me what a catch he was. I told her there was nothing to apologize for. He fooled everyone. Fooling people was the one real talent he ever had. And the money? My grandmother's $600,000? It is still mine. Every cent, untouched. 8 months later, I finally used a small part of it to start the business I had always talked about and never once had the courage to leave my safe job for. The careful woman's careful gift became the foundation of a life that is entirely, unmistakably, only my own. No one's name on any of it but mine. Exactly as she planned it. Exactly as she would have wanted. I want to leave you with the thing I understood in that kitchen, 72 hours before my wedding, standing frozen with my hand on a laptop lid and a box of cufflinks under my arm. When someone betrays you, every instinct screams at you to make noise, to scream, to break things, to let the whole world see your pain so that someone, anyone, will witness it and call it wrong. But noise is exactly what they expect. Noise is easy to wave away as a woman who simply couldn't handle it. The far more frightening thing, the thing they never, ever planned for, is silence. Calm. A person who looks directly at the worst thing that has ever happened to them and, instead of shattering, begins to think. Begins to prepare. Begins to choose the exact moment, and the exact room, and the exact audience. Daniel told my sister he was patient. He had no earthly idea what patience actually looks like. Patience isn't waiting to take something from someone. Patience is waiting, calmly, to let a person show you completely who they are, and then handing them every last consequence, gift-wrapped, in front of everyone whose opinion they ever cared about. I didn't ruin my wedding. I simply attended the unmasking of the man I almost married. I just happened to be wearing white. My name is Claire Bennett. He was certain I would never see it coming. He told her, over and over, that he was patient. He never once realized that the whole time, quietly, completely, I was the one paying attention. If this story stayed with you, stay a little longer. There are more like it here, stories about the people the world is so quick to underestimate, and the calm, surgical, perfectly timed way the truth finally arrives. No screaming. No throne rings. Just the quiet moment when the person everyone assumed was the victim turns out to have been the only one in the room truly paying attention. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.